Okay, without further ado, I'll get started. Who am I? I'm that GP guy. Okay, as you can see on the right, that's my own Instagram page where you can drop a follow if you haven't. Over there, you'll get to see a bunch of content posts. It can be about anything from environment to politics to media. I basically do a summary analysis on a certain topic, and I try to make it a bite size so that you guys can like revise in time for exams for essays. Yeah, so it ranges not only from content but also to linguistics such as vocab or even grammar. And yeah, you can expect to see this kind of posts on a weekly basis over there. So that's me. You guys can call me Aaron, actually. I'm more popularly known as that GP guy, but people call me Aaron too. I graduated from RJC in 2020. That's about 2 years back. Yeah, so right now I'm in NS, but I'll be moving on to uni NTU on a scholarship in about a year's time. Yeah, so if you've got any questions about GP, feel free to hit me up, or else you can check out my page for other further details. Okay, so this is our table of contents for today. It's pretty concise. I'll be going through some basic political jargons before focusing on two types of essay questions. The two sorts of essay questions are, I label them as populism, number one, and number two is media in politics. Okay, so those two are like the main gist, okay, of the type of essay question that I'll be focusing on. I'm not going to deny that there are many politics essay questions out there. So the reason why I've chosen these two specifically is because I feel that they are quite commonly tested and they are pretty easy to score for. So if you haven't seen them already, well, you'll be seeing them very soon in your MYEs or in your class tests. And hopefully after I've gone through them today in this crash course, then you guys can go for it. Okay. Yeah. Oh, and I know that you guys have already submitted your questions for GP or for this crash course in the form when you guys sign up for the webinar. But along the way, if you've got any other questions, you guys can just key it into the chat group. Yeah, and I'll be able to see it at the end at the Q&A session. So yeah, it doesn't have to be necessarily about politics. It can be anything GP related or even JC, and I'll see what I can do. Okay, so if there's nothing else, I'll move on. Oops. Okay, firstly, basic politics. All right, so what's the difference? So you guys can see that there are four types of governance here, four forms of governance. These four are the most common forms of governance out in the world. Okay, emphasis on common, not necessarily popular. I'm sure you guys have heard of them at least once in your life. Okay, democracy, republic, communism, and the last one is autocracy. I think communism is quite easily understood. Basically, like China. Okay, everyone is equal. Or autocracy. Okay, maybe like North Korea. These are real life examples around us, and I think most of us should have seen them or at least heard of them before. Okay, but when you go down to the specifics, like what is the exact difference between the definitions, right? Some of you might not be so very clear, so I'm just gonna briefly show you guys now. The trick lies between democracy and republic because I feel that between those two is quite similar. I'll be going more in depth later on, but yeah, the other two, communism and autocracy, should be quite easily understood. So maybe you guys might want to spend more time reading the first two. Okay, so democracy, it refers to a government where the people makes the decisions by voting. Okay, whereas in republic, the power to make decisions resides in the elected representatives. So the people will choose a few individuals to represent them, and these selected representatives will make the political decisions on behalf of the people. Okay, and for this webinar, as you guys have probably seen, I'm focusing specifically on democracy. Reason being, democracy is commonly tested for politics essay questions, like the setting in which the the question is based on, okay, is mostly premised upon a democratic nation. Yeah. So I'll be diving deeper into what forms of democracy exist. Okay, there are many democracies out there, but the two most common types of democracies are direct and representative. Okay, there are others such as parliamentary, constitutional, socialist, liberal, but those are the less known ones, and is like straying off to the politics side rather than the GP side. So for the GP aspect, I'm just going to focus on these two, okay, because they will be relevant to what we'll be covering subsequently. Yeah, okay, so for the first form, direct, it means that citizens, as you can see, are able to participate directly in the ruling, such as like in Switzerland. If you guys don't know, Switzerland is a classic example to refer to for national referendums. When countries make decisions on national affairs, okay, they hold referendums. Basically, everyone gets a vote. You voice out your opinion. You feel whether we should vote for, let's say, should abortion be legalized? Yes, no, and then everyone just votes. So that's a referendum, and Switzerland is a classic example for that. The other alternative would be representative. So representative democracy means people elect representatives, okay, to hold the power to speak on behalf of the people in the Congress or in the Parliament. Yeah, and you guys might find that very similar to a republic. Okay, I'm just going to go back. Earlier on, I've mentioned here that the republic is where people elect representatives to hold the power to make decisions for them. So yes, okay, you guys at this point, you might be wondering, like, is it similar or what's the difference? The answer is that democracy, okay, representative democracy and republic, they are not mutually exclusive. Okay, they're actually quite similar. Yeah, and the key difference actually lies in the limits that is placed on the government by the law. So for the republic, okay, there's actually a fixed set of laws which might be implemented to make sure that the minorities, okay, their rights and their rights as a citizen are not being violated upon. Yeah, just to meet the majority's interests. So that's the difference. That's a very subtle difference between democracy, representative democracy, and republic. Okay, and it's good to note at this point that in a pure democracy, which doesn't really exist anywhere, the majority is not restrained in any way. Okay, because they can basically impose their will on the minority. Yeah, so that's the difference. Nowadays, most modern nations, such as US, okay, UK, I would say that they are democratic republics. So it's like a half-half like that, with a constitution that can be amended by an elected government. So what are some aspects of democracy that you need to be aware of? Pros and cons. Okay, firstly, you can look at the left-hand side first. So the justifications for democracy, okay, why people feel that democracy is good, is effective, is because of freedom, specifically freedom of speech and equality for all. So in a democratic nation, you're basically able to like voice out your opinions. Okay, you have a say. You can actively express yourself and let the people around you know about what is your views on a certain affair or news or national event. Yep, and equality. So that means that we are all equal. It's not that I can vote but you can't vote because I'm better than you. There's no such thing. That's basically what it means. Everyone is equal in a democratic nation. Political participation. So in some countries, like let's say for autocratic countries, okay, they might not allow the citizens to have a say in political affairs. Okay, they will basically make decisions on their own in their ivory tower, and they won't consult the opinions of the people. So that is for that form of governance. But for democracy, political participation is one of the key aspects that is being championed for. Yeah, so everyone gets a say, everyone gets to vote, no matter of race, religion, whatsoever. And the last one, educated citizenship. That basically means that every citizen is educated, okay, on what is going on in the nation. For moving on to the criticisms, which is quite important because they can be used for subsequent arguments in the essays that we'll be going through soon. Firstly, we have illusory sense of participation in political decision making. So what does that mean? As I've mentioned in the justification, everyone can participate, no matter of race and religion or whatsoever. And that is actually it can be critiqued upon that it gives us an illusory sense that you actually have the power to make a difference. Okay, but in reality, some people say that that's not the case because when we have majority versus minority impact, the minority's opinions might not matter as much. Okay, or in the grand scheme of affairs, when we have millions of people making votes, okay, your vote might not really make that much of a difference. Yeah, so it gives us the people the impression that they have a say or they can influence. Okay, but reality might prove otherwise. So that's one criticism. And secondly, which is one of the more common ones, voters aren't experts. So it literally means what it says that people like you and I, we might not be far-sighted enough. Okay, we might be too myopic because we don't know enough about politics. So when it comes to making political decisions, it might not be wise to get our opinion because if we were to voice out what we feel right about national events, it might not be accurate. Okay, it might even negatively impact what is right for our country. Yeah, because um, we only think from our own self-interest. Okay, we only think on the behalf of ourselves. So if it's not good for us, chances are we won't advocate for it. Yeah, such as like maybe increase in taxes. So in reality, it might be better to trust this decision-making power to the government because they are, well, I would say they're more certified, they're more qualified, and they have been trained, they're experienced. So they are more knowledgeable on the grand scheme of affairs in terms of um, the balance and the nation's resources, so and so. So they might be more um, knowledgeable and expert, okay, enough to make a decision. And the last point, tyranny of the majority. So as I mentioned earlier, majority versus minority impact. A lot of times in democracy, as you can tell that when everyone gets a vote, chances are the majorities will, okay, their interests will most likely be reflected more than the minority. Okay, because if um, we are voting on a certain topic and the majority of the people choose to vote towards their interest, okay, leaning towards their interest, chances are the minorities' votes wouldn't matter as much in making a difference. So it's quite obvious that most likely they would be oppressed. Yeah. So that's one of the criticisms for a democratic nation. Okay, so I have taken some time to compile a list of essay questions, just so that you guys can take a look at what are the common questions that can be that concerns democracy. Okay. As you can tell, the reason why I'm focusing on democracy for this webinar is because it's really commonly tested. Not if it's not democracy, it could be aspects of democracy, such as freedom of speech, okay, um, popular viewpoint or their own convictions. Okay, and it's good to note that the last three questions, okay, they're actually tested in the 2020 A-level paper one. Yeah, so it's actually more commonly tested than you can imagine. So that is why I think one of you asked before on in the forms like should we even study for politics? Yeah, this is why because politics comes out really often. So if you can make sure that you know some basic understanding of what is democracy, what are the aspects of it, okay, then it will be good. Yeah, because in my opinion, I feel that it's quite an easy question to score for. Okay. Now moving on, populism. Populism, according to Google, it refers to a political approach that strives to appeal to ordinary people who feel that their concerns are disregarded by established elite groups. Okay, in other words, if you don't understand what this means, it's basically saying that populistic governments, they come up with policies or campaigns. Okay, let's say during elections, they'll intentionally say stuff that appeals to the majority. Like I will lower tax, I will give out free vouchers, I will make education free, I will give everything free. And I may not necessarily hold true to my words, but I'm just basically saying it to make sure that you vote for me in the election. Yeah, so that's what a populistic government would sound like. Now, assess the view that the government should always listen to popular opinion. So, uh, now that you have now that I have gone through the word populism, okay, you guys can tell that this question is specifically testing on the topic of populism. Okay, um, three arguments. Why should a government always listen to popular opinion? Is because the popular opinion, well, it obviously highlights what the society needs. Okay, it points towards what the nation is lacking, what the government can do to make the nation's stability or development better. Okay, and it's not a good idea because, well, you see, it goes back to the cons that I mentioned earlier. Citizen myopia, which is basically voters aren't experts, okay, and tyranny of the majority. So you see that knowing about what democracy means, okay, what are the aspects of democracy, the basics, the fundamentals, and what are the pros and cons, okay, what each aspect might mean, it can really help a lot for coming up with arguments in essays. Now, our first point highlights what the society needs. I choose to focus on this particular example in Singapore. So it's a pretty good AQ example if you were to attempt it for paper 2. Okay, our Singapore conversation, if you have heard of it, it will be good. It was first initiated in September 2012 by our PM Lee Hsien Loong as a national conversation among Singaporeans. Okay, so they have two objectives. Firstly, to engage Singaporeans on their desired future for the nation, and secondly, to establish a broad consensus on the key issues that should be addressed. So, as I've mentioned earlier in the pros for democracy, okay, political participation. This is one form in which our our nation, okay, Singapore, tries to include us in the policy making decisions. They get our opinions on matters that affect all of us on a national scale, such as in this case, maybe I think they're talking about education in the top right picture over here. Yeah. So education was one of the core focus for our Singapore conversation, I think in 2016. Yeah, this was the first round in 2012. They had a second round again in 2016 or 17. Can't remember. But yeah, so basically they were talking about, well, policies related to our younger generations. Um, what are the programs that can come that the MOE can come up with to make learning better and more enjoyable for the younger generation? And it's important because this kind of updates, okay, this kind of inclusion, it allows the citizens, you and I, to express ourselves, make sure that our views of national events are being heard. Yeah, and hopefully, okay, if we were to make a constructive or a good um, advice, okay, and it might even you might even like live to see it to take root, okay, in a few years to come. especially since at the moment, right now, I would say that our educational landscape is shifting very regularly with all the new programs and the new PSLE systems and merging of O level and N level. So yeah, you may never know. Okay, then moving on to the flip side, why is it that our government should not listen to a popular opinion? Okay, they should not listen because of citizen myopia. In other words, it's a voters are experts argument. So Brexit referendum, I feel, is a very good example to look at for this argument because many voters back then, they voted on the basis or wrong or little info, okay, um, of the long run repercussions of Brexit. Okay, if you don't know what Brexit stands for, it means it's like two words. Okay, so Britain, okay, then exit. So that's like merged and like from the word Brexit. Yeah, and back then they had this huge referendum where they were voting, okay, whether or not we should leave, like whether Britain should leave EU, and there were promises made by the Leave campaigners, okay, such as being able to recover large sums of funds in the National Health Service, and along with other promises. Okay, this red bus that you guys see on the top right picture is one of the battle bus. Okay, it's like a campaign bus where they basically try to promote why we should leave. Yeah. So it's actually misleading. It's false. Okay. So as you can see in the on the label on the bus, okay, it says we send the EU 50 million pounds a day. Let's fund our NHS instead. Okay, which stands for National Health Service. Vote leave. Let's take back control. Hashtag take back control. Okay, so um, it has been statistically proven that this message that was being printed on the bus, right, the battle bus, is false. It's actually fake news. Okay, it's misinformation. The head of the UK Statistics Authority, okay, he already debunked whatever was being said on the bus, okay, and said that it's misleading after there was a complaint from one of the Liberal Democrats. Yeah, and yet after a few weeks, this bus still went into the campaign unchanged and is still there with all those words still there. So it's misleading and it influenced a lot of people into voting for Leave. Okay, so I did a bit of research. If you would like to know the specifics about what's misleading about this slogan, is the fact that 50 million pounds a day, okay, a week, that would be 350 million pounds. So 350 million pounds, they say that we send the EU 350 million pounds a week. Okay, that's what they say. But in reality, okay, this 350 million pounds figure is obtained by dividing up UK's official gross payments to the EU. But it's misleading because before they transfer any money, a rebate is applied. Let's say in 2014, there was a 4.4 million rebate, okay? And apart from that, there are other forms of funds that are being sent back for other areas such as agricultural guarantees or payments to the public sector. So in other words, in reality, they only pay a very small sum of money. Yeah, and that's why they say it's misleading. So citizen myopia. In other words, they don't know what the reality of the political situation might be, but they voted based on little information. Maybe they just saw the bus going by and they just voted leave. So that's how it negatively impacted the referendum. Okay, and tyranny of the majority. For this argument, okay, it would be good to look at the Bumiputra policy in Malaysia. This is a very common example that people would use for this argument about how the majority oppresses the minority in democracies. So as you can see from this cartoon at the bottom right, it's like a number one with a Malaysia at the bottom. and the roots form racism. So yeah, if you study history, then it'll be useful. In Malaysia, Bumiputra policy, okay, also known as the majority affirmative action policy, it basically grants special privileges and rights to the Malay race, okay, in the form of racial quota and um, uh, um, privileges on like job applications. Okay, so in 1970s, this policy was implemented by the Malaysian government to elevate, okay, they claim that is to elevate the socio-economic status of the economically disadvantaged Malay community. So back then, this policy, it was triggered by tensions between the majority population, okay, and the much smaller but wealthier ethnic Chinese community. So yeah, you have it over there, majority and minority. And back then, they came out with this policy which clearly puts the Chinese at a disadvantage. Okay, and in um, if it comes to referendums or making or voting, okay, then clearly the Malays would have an advantage because strength in numbers, and the policies that will be implemented will be favoring them over the Chinese also or other ethnic minorities in Malaysia. Yeah. So that's that. And I'll be ending off this question, okay, on populism with a quote from Albert Einstein. What is popular may not always be right, and what is right may not always be popular. Okay, moving on. Okay, so for the first question, I managed to cover uh, an aspect, okay, a political ideology in democracies, okay, populism. Moving on, I'll be touching on media and politics. Reason is because back then when I held a poll, okay, on my account whether or not to hold a crash course on politics or media, majority voted for politics, but media come in pretty close to like a few guys off. So I'm just gonna cover on one question: social media and democracy. So it's like half media and politics. Okay, so social media is a force for democracy. Do you agree? A force in this case, it means that it's a tool. Okay, it helps. It supports democracy. It makes it go further. So do you agree? Definitely, it's a tool for advocacy, and not a good idea because of censorship or echo chamber effect. Now, if you want to take the stand of no, you disagree. In other words, you're coming out with like arguments, okay, on why is it that social media might not be so helpful. It might not be a good tool for democracy because there are certain um, aspects or areas that limits its power, okay, to help to further democracy. Yeah, okay, so we can tackle this one by one first, starting off with yes, I agree because social media is a tool for advocacy. One case study that we can look at is BLM. It's a very common example that I'm sure most of you would know. Okay, so the specifics. BLM actually started off in 2013. Okay, it didn't start off with George Floyd. George Floyd was one of the last straw, but before that, it had already existed for years. Okay, many years. So it first started out when a policeman, okay, he killed a 17-year-old black teen. And this hashtag, okay, BLM, Black Lives Matter, it was used 30 million times on Twitter with around 17,000 mentions per day on average. So those are some pretty high statistics. And um, it is not only used by the black people now. Okay, if you look at it now, it is used by many people around the world, people who stand with them against the tyranny of the police force in US. Okay, and despite being a minority race, the hashtag has transcended the physical numbers and is supported by everyone around the globe. So why is it a tool for democracy? Because advocacy. Okay, remember one of the the justifications for democracy is about freedom of speech, okay, freedom of expression, equality. Yeah. So this argument, it shows how social media furthers that pro of democracy. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Why is it that social media might not be so effective? Because of censorship. So, one freedom of speech is an example that I like to use when I talk about censorship in China. Okay, China is a classic example to look at for censorship and oppression. There are many, many examples that I can think of from China, but for today, we're just going to be focusing on this hashtag. So back then, if you haven't heard of his name, Dr. Li Wenliang, he was the guy who discovered the virus, okay, COVID-19 virus. Well, there were rumors back then when COVID-19 pandemic first began. We heard about how it spread from Wuhan or it leaked from a laboratory in US or it's some kind of a propaganda. Okay, but in reality, in 2019, this guy, okay, this doctor, he was the one who discovered the virus along with 8 other whistleblowers, and he tried to let the world know about it. Okay, he tried to spread about awareness, okay, regarding this virus, telling us to be careful about it. But he was silenced. He was oppressed by the Wuhan police for spreading fake news. Yeah, and eventually he got the virus himself. Okay, which is very unfortunate. And after his death, okay, the hashtag "I want freedom of speech" went viral on Weibo. I think there was an article about it. It went viral for about less than 24 hours before it was taken down. But before it was taken down, it actually reached like the second or the first on the search engine on Weibo. So it went really, really viral. Yeah. Okay, so censorship. Why is it that social media might not be such a good tool for democracy? It's because in certain countries, okay, we have some limitations, such as in this case political censorship in China. The fact that they limit social media and control its ability to spread information, okay, to spread awareness, okay, to advocate about certain issues, and um, it kills the first pro that I mentioned earlier on in the pros and cons list for democracy, okay, freedom of expression. Yeah, so this is like a direct contrast, a stark contrast to the previous argument that we just went through on BLM. So this is why social media might not be a tool for democracy in certain countries. Okay, moving on to our last argument, the echo chamber effect. Um, Echo chamber, okay, is a very common argument for GP. So if you haven't heard of it, basically echo chamber refers to how you can imagine that it's really like it says a chamber. You're in a globe. As you can see in the top right hand picture, okay, everyone is in their own globe, and they are constantly exposed to similar opinions or viewpoints, okay, as their own. So basically, if you have a political um, preference, okay, or you're like leaning towards one side, let's say you're more liberal or you're more conservative, okay, then you will be constantly exposed to other people who share the same thoughts as you, okay. And when it comes to news, like let's say um, when you're talking about um, uh, uh, the national news or something, and you would only be exposed to the same people which have the same thoughts as you. So you are not like exposed to more like alternate information. That means that what you know is very limited because you only know so much. Okay, and you're not exposed to other viewpoints from other opposing sides. And that's not good because ultimately that means that your understanding of current affairs is very weak, it's very limited. It might not offer you the comprehensive understanding on this topic. So you will not be able to like maybe make a fair judgment on certain issues. Like. Okay, so for this, I don't really have a specific example, but I can talk about a general trend, culture, okay, which started out back then in post COVID-19, okay, the xenophobia sentiments. So when the news, there were rumors that it spread from Wuhan. As you guys know, for a while, for a period, everyone was hating on the Chinese. Okay, there were hate crimes, violence carried out on Chinese in other countries. Okay, especially in the UK. Asian Americans, they were all being assaulted. Okay, there were news of them being attacked publicly on the streets because of xenophobia sentiments. So if you don't know what xenophobia stands for, phobia means the fear of something. Okay, so sino is just Chinese, specifically focusing on Chinese. It's like xeno, but xenophobia is about in general other race. Okay, but xenophobia is specifically focusing on just Chinese. So as I mentioned, okay, echo chambers, they are pretty bad because they can create misinformation and they can distort your perspective. So you basically find it hard to think critically since you're only exposed to one opinion. You don't consider other opposing views or discuss other topics, okay? And this effect can be worsened by confirmation bias, the tendency to favor information that reinforces your own beliefs. Now, why is it that this is related to the question at all? Is because social media is a tool for democracy. Okay, and you disagree with it is because, as you guys know, social media have algorithms. Okay, and the algorithms, they control or they structure, they influence what is exposed to your feed. Yeah, so it's not random. Okay, whatever that you see on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, it's not random. They actually have a strategic algorithm that analyze what are your preferences, what are the content that you like to see, what is your um, beliefs or your interests, and they will use it, okay, the information based on what you like and what you comment on all those posts. They'll gather all those information and do some big data analysis and conclude that, oh, you are a so and so person, and they will only expose you to certain information. Yeah, depending on your preferences. So this echo chamber effect basically comes in naturally with our use of social media, because the more we use social media, the more vulnerable we are to this kind of algorithms. So if you're talking about small issues, it's fine because it doesn't really matter much. But when it comes to larger national issues such as referendums, like let's say Brexit, okay, earlier on, um, you will only be exposed to your own viewpoint, and you won't really learn much or understand much about other perspectives or other arguments. So you are basically quite narrow-minded. Yeah, you don't have a big picture understanding of the whole issue. So that means that you might not be able to make the right judgment call. Okay. To end off, I have another quote for this question also. If you open the window for some fresh air, you have to expect some flies to blow in, from Deng Xiaoping. I find it quite suitable for this question because social media and the fact that we took on the negative stand. Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Okay. If not, I think we have come to the almost the end of the webinar, the Q&A section. Here's a QR code that you guys can scan to um, feedback, okay, about the webinar and what you've learned from it. And in the meantime, I'll be looking through the questions that you guys have submitted. The feedback form that you guys see here is also the same feedback form as the one that was sent to your email. So if you already submitted it via the email one, then this one is okay. You guys can like don't submit it. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. I've got a bunch of questions for GP in general. I think I'm going to start off with the one on time management. Let me see. Okay, there were three or two or three questions on time management. Okay, so how would you suggest to manage your time? What should we be doing 1 week before MYEs? Okay, I would say that in general, right, for exams, okay, for any subjects, you shouldn't be still scrambling for notes in the last week. Okay, the last week, in my opinion, is where you settle down with your notes and you revise them, you review them, try to memorize them, understand them, and get used to them before the paper itself. So that 1 week is not like a lot of time actually. Is for you to make last preparations. Yeah, mentally. So for GP, I wouldn't recommend that you spend too much of your last week doing practices. Okay, maybe try to spend more time on the memory and understanding of the concepts first. Yeah, so if you have made notes in class, for example, you can take your time to digest them and make sure that you get them in first. Yeah. And even if you're really very free, you have understood your notes and you want to practice, you guys can try making like point forms, okay, like what I just did. Maybe a bit more elaborate because mine was very brief. But um, like just form a simple outline, a template, okay, for your essays. Yes, no, why, what are the examples, what are the arguments, how do you want to argue it? We add in a bit more words for elaboration and yeah. But don't spend too much time writing a full essay because chances are in the last week, no one is going to mark your essay. Okay, and unless you have a tutor or you can mark it yourself, or else yeah, it's pretty much a waste. So if you spend the time writing a full essay. Okay, instead you use it to write like small essay questions. You write out the templates and the outlines. That would mean that you can cover more essays in the same time. Yeah, and it's also easier to revise also because after you have finished writing out those arguments, right, you can revise them and like review them easily since they're all in point form. So it's fitting for like a last week preparation. Yeah. Also, if you're new, okay, I would say that teacher consultations normally don't happen in the last week. Like, as far as I can remember, a lot of teachers will like tell the students in the last week. They'll be busy with preparation and their own administrative aspects, so they are not free for consultations at all. At least from my personal experience lah in JC. Yeah, so if you ever want to like arrange for consults with your own GP tutor or um uh, anyone, then try to make it before the last week, like maybe um 3 weeks before or 3 to 4 weeks before. Yeah, give them some room to plan out their schedule first, so that they won't have an excuse to like ignore you. Yeah. Okay. Essay planning skills. I've held a separate webinar on that. My first one actually. The video to it is on Inkie webinar. So you guys YouTube channel. Okay, the video is called, I think it's called essay writing webinar or something. Yeah. So it basically shows you how to form a full essay structure. Okay, what is a concrete structure and what are some good arguments that you can use following this structure. Yeah, the details I can't really remember it too much, but you guys can like watch it at one time. Okay. How to craft an interesting intro. Same thing. I also covered that during the webinar also. So you guys can rewatch that recording. But off the top of my head, I would say that for introductions, don't need to spend too much time on it. Okay, I would introductions generally they just need to meet a few basic requirements. Okay, having a thesis, in other words, presenting your arguments like okay, pros and cons, your critics' views, your own arguments for this topic. Maybe defining key terms. Okay, like unpacking the metaphors or trying to break down what the question is talking about. Those are some basic aspects of a introduction. But beyond that, as long as you have written all these aspects for introduction, right, you can move on to covering the arguments already, because the arguments are like the main part of the essay. Yeah, if your introduction is too long, you would basically waste too much time, and you don't have enough time to develop your arguments subsequently for your essay, and it'll be a rush. Yeah. My introductions are generally like about uh, 5, 6 lines. I don't write too long, but as long as I cover the basic fundamentals, then I'll move on quickly. Yeah, because there's really not much time for essay. It's just 1.5 hours, so it can be really really rushed. Must we be politically correct when discussing issues about governance? Okay, if by politically correct you mean we can't criticize government, then obviously no. Okay, GP is the exact platform where you can like openly criticize the government. Okay, constructively. Okay, and emphasis on constructively, because as long as you have a logical argument, it makes sense and it's valid, you have examples to back it up, then sure, go ahead. Like what I just did with one of the arguments back there. Which one was it? Yeah, see, censorship. I just criticized the government. In Singapore, we have our own forms of examples for this point also, but I'll leave that to your own research. But yeah, if you're talking about whether or not we can criticize or must we strictly be politically correct, then no, there's no need to be politically correct. Okay, GP doesn't award you for worshipping your government. Okay, they reward you for making constructive arguments. So that's the focus. Okay. AQ. If you have a really niche AQ topic that you don't know enough about, what is the next best course of action? Okay, I know you guys think that some topics for AQ are like very random and you have probably never studied it before or heard anything of any news about it before, but chances are you have heard of it at some point in your life. Okay, maybe a news article or a trip to whatsoever place. Okay, let's say it's zoos, then I'm sure you guys have been there before. Anything that you know, you can use it. That is the a huge helping point for AQ lah. Okay, because let's say for my year, I think mine was leadership. Okay, it was really abstract. I felt that it was quite random also. But in terms of examples, there's definitely a lot of key figures in Singapore that we can look at. Okay, our prime ministers, our presidents. Yeah, so you might think that you don't know what to talk about for this topic, but I'm pretty sure you do. It's just that you don't know how to choose or you can't recall because maybe you're stressed or something. Yeah. So, and plus most questions they will include like a talk from personal experience point. Yeah, so that's basically to help you to like have more grounds to talk about. So if you really, really can't think about any concrete examples out there in Singapore, then maybe you might want to spend a bit more time talking about your personal experience. Yeah, although I wouldn't encourage that because that's basically makes your AQ quite weak. Yeah, you won't be able to score high for it. Okay, and if it helps, okay, there's no rule saying that for AQ you can only write in Singapore because AQ tests on your own society. okay, is your own society. So if you want to talk about maybe where you came from, your homeland, let's say in India, okay, or in China, sure, you can go ahead and talk about that. If you understand like the local trend and culture and beliefs, values better. Maybe you don't understand Singapore that much, but maybe you know other countries better. You guys can go for it. Yeah. What is it? Oh, how do you? Wait, never mind. Why would people want to write about politics for GP? Yeah. So I think I mentioned it earlier on. Um, Politics essays, in my opinion, I feel is really very easy. The arguments that can be crafted, they can be repeated for a lot of questions. Okay, so if let's say basically for this webinar, okay, I've gone through a couple of arguments like echo chamber, censorship, um, advocacy. All these arguments are more useful than you might think. Okay, you can use it for many different questions out there for politics and media questions. That's the reason why I like to do media and politics questions because a lot of their arguments, okay, for many questions can be repeated. So unlike and furthermore, when it comes to examples, right, there's an abundance of them. Okay, it's not as hard to think of examples as compared to let's say the arts or let's say science. You might need to think for those topics. It would be necessary, okay, for you to have like done your research. You need to really look up for concrete examples regarding those topics. You can't just think of something out of your head and smoke it up. Yeah, but whereas for politics and media, I feel there are many examples out there in the world. Okay, if you read the news, I'm not saying that you must really read every single magazine and news articles, but if you just read the news regularly, okay, on a daily basis, you keep track of what is going on in the world. It's not that hard to come up with examples. Yeah. And I guess there's also a rumor going around that um, politics and media questions are easier to score for. So I'm just gonna take this chance to like kind of disprove that. Okay, because personally I feel that um, politics and media essays, right? Okay, even though I say that they're very easy to score for, and they can be done quite easily, but um, it depends on the individual. So don't get your hopes up and right whack a question on politics just because of this webinar. Yeah, if ultimately you're not confident because you don't know much about politics and you don't know how to phrase your arguments and stuff, then don't go for the question in exam. Yeah, ultimately in exam, you want to go for a question that you're confident in. You want to make sure that you really know what you're doing so that you don't have to like smoke something out halfway through. But that's not good. Okay. Um, People who attempt those questions will generally be prepared, obviously, and that's why they are able to score well for it. So it's not because in the exam the teachers mark it more leniently or something. It's definitely because they have done more preparation for it. That's why they know it better. Yeah, and that's why they can score better for it.
And then it's always that story of that bunch of drunk horny uncles that went to the bar and then started the whole COVID again that halted any progression. But yes, it's still on the table. We can think of, I mean, we are looking of doing that soon, and that's an idea that we actually have, but not really for GP10. So that's a good suggestion. We'll see how it works. Of course, we need to have enough tutors that are willing to do a podcast, because I think a one person podcast might be a bit ineffective when it comes to GP. I don't know. That's how I see it right now, because I think for GP it's good to have different viewpoints. It's more of like conversational as compared to a narration. Yeah, but of course, if you guys prefer narration, then sure, do whatever floats your boat. But yeah, but yes, that's we'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
Hey, maybe you could join Inkie and kickstart the podcast.
Yeah, but if you're a current student, we suggest that you just focus on your your studies first, especially if you're J2 this year. Yeah. But as for podcast quotes, you want to talk about that?
Or
It's a bit suspicious though. And unless I don't think we are that famous enough to justify. To justify such stuff. Especially we don't have that qualification yet. If you're talking about our podcast, but if you talk about like some other people's podcasts, then same famous ones, then I guess possibly.
yeah,
But
I
as
think you
yeah,
need to choose. Be careful about which podcast you use.
yeah, that's
The
the thing.
big ones, the famous ones, then sure, should should be okay.
Yeah, I guess if you use it as an intro, as a hook, I think that'll be very interesting. just as an aside, if you're not looking at it as a point, yeah, that's just me.
But I've already seen people use podcasts for their essays too. So I think you need to have like
Yeah,
strong understanding. Maybe you have like listened to a lot of podcasts, then yeah.
you have if you're looking at using a podcast as factual points, then you really need to consider whether is it really is the podcast whatever they are expressing in the podcast, are they viewpoints or are they actually backed by proper facts? Then of course it's gonna behave. Then of course if it's backed by proper facts, then why not just look at the proper facts and then derive your own points? Yeah. Okay, but anyways, back to you for the if you want to continue with the next question.
Uh, on reverse for GP, like example how you organize your example bank for paper one and AQ, and how to prepare for SAQ and AQ. Okay, that's a lot of questions. Firstly, I think we can do it bit by bit. Okay, so example bank for paper one. Um, organization it really is up to the individual. There is no best way to do it, I feel. Um, for me, I uh, arrange it like topically. So I have a media, I have a environment, science and tech. Okay, then I just like compile it there. And obviously for media, science and tech, okay, politics, there are many different aspects. Let's say for media, there's echo chamber. Okay, there's censorship. So for the different pointers, okay, for each topic, I will compile maybe a list of local and foreign examples. Yeah, in point form, just like the name and a bit of elaboration on what this thing is about. Yeah, I try to keep it like really short because I compile a lot. Like my own notes, which I'm still using now for my lessons, have like over 100 pages on Google Docs. Yeah, so it's like really heavy, content heavy. So I try to keep it short so that it's easy to memorize. Um, and the same goes for AQ lah. The same example thing, okay, it can be used for both paper one and AQ because I don't like separate local and foreign. I compile it together. So that's just me. So if you want to do it, you can also come up with your own, maybe your own structure. AQ, how to prepare for paper two? Okay, SAQ, I feel it takes practice, just practice because paper two for comprehension, they test you on your ability to read between the lines. Okay, to think critically. It's not like in secondary where you can just copy paste the whole sentence and like get the full marks. Yeah, I feel in GP for paper two, there are a number of questions which really require you to think deep and to really try to understand what the text is about. Yeah, so that takes practice because if you are not linguistically strong, okay, you don't understand what certain texts or certain messages mean, then you will need to read more and um, practice more, okay, to like get the drill going so that you know how to answer all those questions. And I can say that for GP, you may not be able to predict the question, like the comprehension topic, but the question types can be prepared for. Okay, if you notice that there are certain types of questions like what do the italics mean? Okay, why does the author say this in this tone? That maybe, yeah. So that's how maybe you can try to build a trend and compile the common paper two types of questions. Yeah, and you can prepare like a fixed template or answer to meet those questions also. At least that's how I did it for my own paper too lah. So that's one way that you can prepare for it. Same goes for AQ. AQ examples, you can refer to the example bank that you prepared for paper one, and the structure you need to practice again and again. Yeah. Time management is really key. It's even more crucial for paper two than paper one, I feel, because you need to do like a summary and a comprehension and an AQ. That's like three things in the same time, and that's very rush. Yeah. So if you're talking about doing a full practice, right, which I recommend, okay, for paper two, then it can basically train your ability to like um, finish each section quickly. Yeah. So good recommendation would be for paper for the SAQ, maybe like for the let me see, 40 to 45 minutes. Okay, 45 minutes around there. Then for summary is about 10-15 minutes. Yeah, and for AQ about like 20 to 25 minutes. If you add it up, that would leave you about 5 to 10 minutes extra. That one is for buffer. So in case you want to use more time somewhere, you can use it. But if you exceed your time for like the comprehension and then you spill over to summary and spill over to AQ, then that's not good lah. Because I know a lot of students have that issue where they basically like cram one or two sentences for AQ and that's it. Then that's like a straight zero. So you wouldn't want that lah. Which is why I would say time management is very important for AQ.
Just a sidetrack. If you're interested on AQ techniques, we actually conducted a webinar
Oh yeah.
last year, July, or is it June? I can't remember. Yeah, but it's in the playlist that I sent earlier. Yeah,
Yep.
so you guys can check it out. So we actually have webinar for AQ and also for paper one, and now politics and governance. Yes, just short of paper two. I'm actually able to be a teacher.
I've been avoiding it.
Oh, but paper two is just, oh boy, SAQ.
Paper two is it just needs practice. I feel.
I mean, there's no hard and fast way because the questions varies and the content also what they're looking out for. There's really not exactly a way to impart like actual techniques other than just helping points.
I think for the technical questions, they can be prepared for lah. But for the more abstract ones where they ask for your opinion or your viewpoint, one is it's tougher to prepare for.
Yeah, honestly, right, from my year, the GP, it will hit you with the most unexpected topics. Yeah, so be prepared for topics that you never thought would actually come out, but it comes out. It's not because there's not the type of topics that are very complicated. It could be just very simple, but then it's just like overlooked because we thought it wouldn't happen. Like for example, my year was zoos. Like who who would thought of that, huh?
Oh, you did this one, okay.
Yeah, I did a zoo one. And then what apology, right? Well, your year was apology, right?
Oh, was it? I can't remember. Is it apology or
Or was
leadership?
it the year after? Or was it the year before? I can't remember. But I know there's one year about apology, which was quite ironic.
Oh yeah, that was mine. That was mine. I almost forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's apology.
Yeah. So, guys, just take it, and then just go with the flow. Yeah, the main important thing is just technique. Mm, for for comprehension. For people too. Yeah.
And for that year, I can tell you guys that most of us thought there wouldn't be any examples. But hey, I mean, there's a number of examples that you can look at, like a public apology by our ministers.